Good afternoon, everybody. This is Dee Reinhardt with Illinois WorkNet, and we are starting our community-based organization technical assistance call, and we have a full call today, and we're going to get started with our guest speaker so that we can be aware of his time. I would like to introduce Brian Durham you're with ICCB, right?
That is correct.
All right. I'm going to give everybody a real quick chance to check in, and then we'll get rolling with the presentation. If you do want to download Brian's presentation, it is in the file pod below the chat pod. And I guess I should be proper here. This is Dr. Brian Durham. He's the Deputy Director for Academic Affairs with the Illinois Community College Board. So welcome, Brian. Let me get your presentation up a little bit more. All you have to do is press the up and down, the right and left arrows in the pod to move the slides backward and forward. We'll watch the chat pod for you, but otherwise I'm going to be on mute. So welcome, Dr. Brian Durham.
All right, thank you, and thanks to everyone for taking the time to hear me talk about career pathways. I'm glad to be able to do it. We've got a lot of work going on around the state, and I think it's really a critical topic. I hope everybody can see the screen, and Dee, I don't see the chat box, so if anything comes up, please do just call out and let me know. So what I'm going to talk about today is understanding and defining and building career pathway systems. And when we get through this, I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody has, or if we don't have time for those, feel free to reach out to me afterwards. So you can kind of see what the agenda is. We've got a lot of items here, and given we have about 45 minutes, there may be a couple of times when I skip over things, but I will try to give everything its due. But essentially we'll talk about the programs and elements of building a system and provide some examples, as I've said. So let's start here with understanding what career pathways are. And I will do my best not to read all these slides to you, but sometimes, webinars, you have to do that kind of thing. But I think the point is you look at what a career pathway is it's about building upon lots of work that has been done in the education and training systems that are out there for decades. So it's not a new concept. It is, I think, it really represents the culmination of a lot of good work that's been happening in all those systems and includes support, career and tech ed, workforce systems, employers, et cetera, et cetera. And I know a lot of you have been working on this work for a long time, and it's important to acknowledge that fact. Let's talk about what it's not. It is not a panacea for all of education, economic, and workforce problems. One of the tendencies we certainly have in my field of education, and I'm sure in workforce fields and others, is every time a new idea or a new concept comes along, we may have a tendency to think that's going to fix everything, and we know that's not the case. Career pathways, again, builds upon that work, but it's certainly not going to fix all of our problems. And it is important as we think about understanding a career pathway that we do work to limit it in some ways because, both not being a panacea, but also if you make it too broad of a theory, that it exactly as the quote says, it can explain nothing, and we don't want that. So what we do want is to understand what we mean by a career pathway. And so we've got a couple of areas focus here in the webinar that help limit it, and they're certainly not the only conversations out there about career pathways. There are lots of them. So in 2012, the Federal Department, HHS, Department of Education, and Department of Labor issued a joint letter that expressed their commitment to career pathways and using that across these systems. And in that letter, they laid out a pretty good definition, a series of connected education and training strategies and support services that enable individuals to secure industry-relevant certification and obtain employment within an occupational area and to advance to higher levels of future education and employment in that area. So we've encountered other concepts that are similar to this over the years, certainly career ladders, career lattices, programs of study, if you're familiar with the idea out of the career and technical education law. And the career pathway has often been thought of in the context of adults and some of these others in the context of K-12. But it really is about connecting education and training that leads to a career. Because we have the newly passed WIOA law, and because we have a system really there around workforce, and I expect this definition of a career pathway will make its way into the Carl Perkins Act of Career and Technical Education. There really is a pretty good definition in WIOA. It doesn't capture everything, but I think it's important to point out that lays out some of the elements. So you've got that joint letter, and then you've also got the WIOA definition. You've got a lot of work going on through Department of Ed specifically that I've been involved in as well, that is not necessarily represented here today. But, you know, the point is there's a lot of conversation. Aligns with skill needs of industries, prepares individuals to be successful in secondary, post-secondary, including apprenticeships, and that's one of the important pieces of WIOA, is that it specifically calls out apprenticeships. A career pathway includes counseling, and that's career counseling specifically, but I think can be interpreted more broadly around support services as well. It refers to education offered concurrently within the same context as workforce preparation, so that might be an individualized education or an integrated education and training program. It might be work-based learning experiences. It might be on-the-job training combined with education, you know, a number of ways. And it organizes all those services to meet the needs of an individual, and it accelerates that student through their career advancement. It enables an individual to attain a secondary school diploma or its equivalent, and at least one recognized post-secondary credential. And I think in Illinois, we certainly recognize as well that this definition, while it doesn't specifically say it, also really includes that industry-recognized credential alongside that notion of a post-secondary credential. And it helps an individual enter or advance in a specific occupation. I hope you can see my picture there, but there are 6 elements that the Department of Labor lays out for a career pathway system. In some ways you have a system around each sector where there's need, but you identify a sector, you design programs for that sector, you identify funding sources, and often one of the big conversations these days because of tight funds is around how do you braid funding and how do you integrate funding to meet the needs of students. You have to work to align policies and programs. Measurement is important, and partnerships are, of course, important. And all this kind of happens in a cycle, and I think that emphasizes, going back to my first slide around the definition, the continuous improvement element to a career pathway system. So you don't build a career pathway or a career pathway system and say, hey, we're done with that. This is an ongoing, evolving, continuous process to make career pathway systems effective and career pathways within them. We also have been involved in Illinois in some work around the Alliance for Quality Career Pathways, which is a project out of the Center for Law and Social Policy. It involved the Community College Board and the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity and other partners specifically in Illinois that developed some similar elements to the DOL elements. So you go back and you look at those DOL elements. You've got identify sector and design, et cetera, And you can see that these, although they may be worded a little differently, are hitting at pretty much the same things. You've got committing to a shared vision, engaging employers, that collaboration, which gets at that funding issue and the braiding of funding, support services, measurement again. One thing I like about this piece that you don't have quite as explicitly in the DOL definition is this integration of evidence-based best practices. So we want to draw upon the good things that are happening in systems. And my point is here, there are a number of different models, but they're kind of getting at some of the same things. So I don't know what's going on with that engage with business slide there, something strange, but
Brian, it's the size of the slide. It would show up well in the regular print version.
Okay, well, good. Well, I apologize for that, but I'll try to hit on it here. So the elements of a career pathway system here, I tried to boil these down as we think across these different models. And so on the right, you've got some of the characteristics that really come out of that HHS work, that joint letter work, I mean. And on the left, you've got kind of a shorthand way of capturing what that system would look like. And I won't read all those to you, but you can see some of the important ones: alignment between systems, engage with business, sector focus. So we can't necessarily do everything all at once, but you focus on and pick a sector, and that may be decided upon regionally. It may be based upon state decisions around sector, I mean, whatever that may be. And so those are kind of those elements. I also wanted to lay out, and I pulled this stuff from the research literature, some of the ways that you might go about building a career pathway system. And this is an example. There are others out there again, and it's incumbent upon all stakeholders to think about these things in one way or another. But ultimately, whatever you call it, these are what I see as kind of the really important elements. You have to know what the gaps are. You have to know where the gaps are, and some of those gaps may be that you're not reaching industry. Some of those gaps may be equity gaps. You may have particular cross-sections of students that are not reached at all. You got to do planning, and you got to do planning with lots of partners, because if you don't do planning with lots of partners, then you're going to have to circle back to those partners over and over again. Of course, implementation, that element of continuous improvement that I talked about. And then you want to expand your pathways. So really, when you talk about building a system, you're going to do some of this work sector by sector, but you're going to expand pathways within that sector, and then you're also going to expand into different pathways or different sectors or clusters if you recognize the 16 career cluster language. So some of the things you may do in a gap analysis, you're going to analyze labor market demand and identify industries. And again, I know these, I think it's important to point out, these are all things that everybody's doing already. It's just putting them together and being systematic about how you engage in this work. That really is a critical component, because everybody that develops a program looks at labor demand, but they may not do a great job, or they may not identify industries appropriately, or they may not work with partners to do that. And so there's room to build upon each of these. You're going to assess your strengths and weaknesses, identify where needs are unmet, and you have to consider the return on investment. You have to consider how it's going to affect and impact your community. And all this, by the way, is pulled from a work by Davis Jenkins and Chris Spence, which is cited later, that I encourage you to go take a look at. When you do career pathway planning, you're going to engage in that gap analysis, and then here you're going to see some of the steps to plan that pathway. You have to organize, you have to involve employers, et cetera, et cetera. Cost is important. How you're going to bring people in and communicate what you've done to the system. I mean, all these elements are important elements to planning that career pathway. And if I had to say, if you had to look at this list and say what's the most important, it really has to be at the beginning, making sure you have all the folks around the table, which includes employers. And we all know one of the challenges with employers is figuring out when is the right time to involve employers, because you certainly don't want to waste an employer's time. But on the other hand, we need their feedback. We need an employer validated, informed, or a driven system, depending on which approach or which language you like. You want it to be a pathway that is based upon employer need. Implementation, if only implementation of anything were actually as simple as this little chart lays it out to be. But these are kind of the big steps. You establish the MOUs, you establish the agreements that are going to help you get to where you want to be. You're going to specify roles, and I can't emphasize how important it is to do that. And this is particularly important as you engage your employer partners, because they're going to want to know what you're doing, but they're also going to want to know and understand their roles. And many of us are in the public sector, are professional meeting participants, and are pretty used to talking things out and working through things in meetings. And sometimes those meetings can be great, sometimes not. And you want to be real clear, particularly with your employer partners, but really with everybody, what is their role and what are they going to get out of coming together to do this. And then ultimately you have to coordinate your services, you have to coordinate your dollars, you have to coordinate with one another to make these career pathways work. And then engaging in continuous improvement. If you take anything away from the webinar today and you only remember one thing, this is it. This is a continuous improvement process. You want to be not only engaged in building the system, but you also want to be engaged in constantly measuring whether that system is appropriate, or whether it's meeting your need, whether your tracking of education and outcomes makes sense, et cetera, et cetera. You want to regularly reevaluate your mission and goals. And I think this is a great place to think about how you want to engage employers as well, because they're going to be able to help you as you think about your mission, vision, and goals. Having them at the table early is going to help you with the employment piece. So continuous improvement is critical. And then, expanding pathways. Repeat. I kind of wanted to say rinse and repeat. You're going to think about different ways to do that, though. It may be other sectors. It may be you want to work with other groups and other populations. You might want to reach out to your community college, or you may want to reach out to another one in your area. Whatever it is, there are multiple ways you can expand a pathway, and it doesn't have to be the same model over and over. It can be different ways. If you have a big area, you may want to work in one area for a while and then move to another. Rinse and repeat. The good news is that there has been a lot of experience doing this. There has been some regional planning done. There certainly is a WIOA framework out there. There are a number of things that have happened already that can inform the work that you do. You have guiding principles, some of those areas that you can draw upon, and you can, I think, get all this stuff. I pulled all this stuff from Illinois WorkNet, by the way, when you look at these examples. So this is right out there and easy for you to access to see what has been done and how you can build your local systems based on some of these ideas, even if they don't look exactly the same. Another good example of how some of that work has been done in the past, and this is about building a regional planning framework. This is a self-assessment. So you may want to think about how, this strategy of aligning, integrating economic development, and I think, there's a good one. We all review data, but have partners jointly review data available and validated. And this is just one page from that self-assessment, and that's out there for folks to use, and the state uses these, and there's a lot of good resources for you to draw upon. Here are some examples of where a local area did a gap analysis and shared their current implications compared to future implications. And you can see they found that they have been focusing on providing more work-based learning, and in the future they may have to think about different recruitment strategies. Their current implications, they're continuing to focus on OJT and work experience, and they're going to have to think about counting less GED and adult ed hours and require more work-based learning activities, et cetera. You can kind of see those. So that's examples of what folks may find in a gap analysis. And here's an example of a data analysis. So you can see here that they're looking at the population of students, and this is obviously a pretty big area, and what share of that is in the Illinois population. And it may be this, and you can do any number of different things, of course, looking at data, those of you that know your way around it, but you know, this is an example of where some folks have done some data analysis. And these are pulled straight from regional plans, by the way, that local workforce areas have pulled together. So some examples. So let's talk a little bit about how you organize for career pathways. And this is the only big red circle in all the PowerPoint. And the point of it is, whatever we do, we cannot work in silos. We absolutely must reach across those silos to work together. One of the ways in which folks recommend that we organize for career pathways, and if you go back through the PowerPoint, you look at that stuff and think, wow, that is a lot of things to get done. That is a lot of work to do. How in the world am I going to do that and also be able to do my current job? And that's where a career path, this way of organizing a career pathway backbone organization comes in. Locally, maybe there's one organization, or maybe partners come together to fund it, or maybe there's a nonprofit that has a particular interest in this that helps basically pull together all the different pieces of a career pathway system, engages partners, helps you with business, engages on issues around evaluation, excuse me, et cetera. It's not the only way. I mean, there are certainly others, and you know, those of us who work in government, we recognize that sometimes somebody's going to get a grant, and that's going to go to their organization, and they're going to use that and kind of lead this. But it is something to think about. And the important thing is you have to think about how you're going to organize for career pathways. And the backbone approach, where you have one organization that really that's kind of their job to pull everybody together, is one that comes out of community impact theory and that has some evidence of effectiveness. So thinking a little bit more, and this is out of the Alliance for Quality Career Pathways, we've touched on some of these, so I won't take too long, but well-connected and transparent education, multiple entry points are important, and multiple exit points are important. And the other piece is that you may serve any number of different populations through a career pathway program. So the days of colleges working with just K-12 students, you know, those days are behind us. I mean, the average age of a student in a community college is anywhere from 25 to 30, depending on where you go. You're going to serve adults. You're going to serve adults with barriers. You're going to serve a number of different populations. And you have to think about how you manage a career pathway system to take advantage of all the opportunities for these different populations, while also still being able to keep it organized and systemic. You also want to have multiple exit points for students that lead to self-sustaining or family-supporting employment and are aligned with those entry points. The four functions that we see of a quality career pathway, again, out of the Alliance for Quality Career Pathways, we've already mentioned participant focus, non-duplicative assessment. That's a tough one, because as you move from organization to organization, everybody wants to assess what everyone needs. And so you think about a system, Whatever door they may enter, the ideal situation is they get assessed for what they need at that door. And then they get support services and navigation assistance at that door and get help to where they want to go. So a sample program component, and there are many: work-based learning, dual credit. I got a chart that I'm going to share with you with several here, but just thinking about one in particular, work-based learning. As you're building a program and you want to make sure there's a lot of work-based learning in it, you got to think about what that is. Learning by doing. Participants engage in a personalized, coordinated continuum of work-based learning, and that helps them with competencies. It helps them develop those competencies, and that's just one of many potential components. Career-focused instruction is another. Real-life situations and experiences. Progressive design is important, and that gets back to that efficient transition and non-duplication. So when you're thinking about building that career pathway, you want to have a design where work-based learning is building upon that instruction, or vice versa, or integrating into and connecting to integrated instruction in some way. And I think I've mentioned several times student supports, and I can't emphasize enough how building a good career pathway system has to integrate student supports. But I will speak just for the community college side of things. But community colleges have a natural division in their system sometimes between the academic side of the house and the support side of the house. And bridging that in the community college sector and those partners is one of the ways in which a career pathway system is built and improved. So here's my chart with sample career pathway program components, and in some ways any of these could fit for any of the others. But as you think about how you're going to personalize and how you're going to build it for specific populations, adult education students are going to benefit from bridge programs, and I mean adult ed bridge programs there. High school students are more in a position to access dual credit or youth apprenticeship maybe. Co-requisite remediation where they do like a credit course alongside a developmental course. Ex-offenders are going to need reentry counseling, and you need to think about how you can kind of connect all these blocks and all these pieces together. Returning adults probably would need some financial aid counseling. They've been out of the game for a while and may not think about what financial aid opportunities are available if they want to try to go to an institution of higher ed. I mentioned earlier multiple entry and exit points. Stackable credentials are an important part of this, and for the community college system at least, we emphasize building a basic certificate into a degree program, an advanced certificate, and leading to an associate's degree. And these are just archetypes. Sometimes those numbers are different. A basic might be 18, an advanced might be 40. It just kind of varies. But the point is, if a student comes in the backside here of the basic certificate, the purple, if you will, and they finish that 12 hours, they can leave and get a job, and that certificate is valuable for a job. And they can come back and have those credits articulate into that next certificate. But along with that, you have to be maximizing credentials, industry credentials. So maybe they get that 12-hour certificate, but they also get a food sanitation certificate or credential if they are in a culinary program. And so they get out and they've got they're more marketable because they've got those credentials. And we work really hard with our system to maximize those already, but that has to be a part of the career pathway conversation. Here's an example of a program on manufacturing production certificate from Harper College, and you can see that students are going to take that first certificate, which is top box there, which is a general, what are we calling it here? Well, it's a manufacturing production certificate, builds core competencies, and prepares students for internships and entry-level positions. But students can leave from there, and then they can go on into one of these other areas. Now, notice the mechatronics. This is a good example. A student is going to do that first one, then they're going to do a 10-hour certificate in electrical maintenance, and then they may get an industrial electronics certificate, and they may get a mechatronics on top of it. And then they get those gen eds at the end, they get a degree. So they leave, and they've got 1, 2, 3, 4 certificates and a degree, which helps make them more marketable. And think about if you're looking at a resume for a student and you want to hire somebody in a manufacturing program or a manufacturing plant, and they've got a list of credentials like this. It's just going to make that student more marketable. And if the student gets to the industrial electronics certificate and they get a job or they have some issue where they have to leave, they're still leaving with some certificates and are marketable and can still access the workforce and a living wage that way. It's contrary to the old model where students come in and they get an AA or an AS or an AAS after 60 hours, and if they leave at 40, then there's some college and no degree. And there's a lot of statistics out there that show that folks that have some college and no degree don't make any more money or do any better than folks with just a high school diploma. I'm going to show you an adult ed pathway here in a moment, but I'd be remiss if I didn't share the career pathways for adult learners. That is really the building block of our adult education system in Illinois. That includes students come in and they may get foundation level skills. Kind of depending where they come in, they can go in any number of doors. An integrated model is adult ed with CTE college credits. Secondary completion is high school completion, exactly what it sounds like. Or they may have some real basic skills deficiencies and have to do low-level reading, or English as a second language fits into here, but ultimately they can come in and find those services anywhere. And here's an example from Triton College of an adult ed pathway that leads to a medical assisting program. And this is an ICAPS program, and what that means is I'd mentioned integrated education and training programs. This is a program where they're doing adult basic education, adult secondary education, focused on getting a high school equivalency, something we used to call the GED, and then at the same time they are concurrently enrolled in credit courses. And you can see they've got an opportunity to bridge from that adult education over to the credit courses. So I want to talk to you a little bit about metrics and how you measure some of this. And these are examples. Again, some of this is going to be driven by your specific program, but you have to think about what these metrics look like locally as well. And I mentioned continuous improvement as a significant part of a career pathway. The performance measurement is also a significant part of a career pathway. And as we all know, any of us who work in programs that are funded by the federal government or the state, we're going to have to meet performance measures whether we like it or not. So this is kind of a way to integrate those into this as well. So in the Alliance for Quality Career Pathways, they've kind of got 4 ways that they lay out the measurement criteria. And so they have criteria for defining programs, quality indicators, that signal how well systems are functioning, interim measures that are about progress. And I think those are really important because I think most of the time when we measure programs, we go from criteria, maybe we get into quality, straight to outcome, at least these days. Or we just do process measures and never look at outcome. There's the flip side of that. But interim measures, interim participant outcome measures are important. And performance measures that are those federal measures, shared measures across different programs are the main outcome measures as we think about this strategy. So here's a sample. A criteria would be, and if you're thinking about you build a path, you build a program, and you have to come up with a measurement strategy, and let's say part of that we're talking about how folks are being referred to programs. So the criterion is a clear referral method and procedure has been adopted for referrals to services. And this comes out of the class and alliance work there cited at the bottom. A quality indicator would be staff are knowledgeable, and they use the policy and they refer clients appropriately. Not necessarily quantifiable, and I think that's important, or not necessarily a quantitative measure. So this could be seen as just a qualitative measure. I'm sure there are some folks out there who could figure out how to make it quantitative, but staff are knowledgeable. And then interim measure, we get into more quantitative. Data analysis suggests students who referred fare better than students who did not receive those services, despite eligibility, who did not receive those referrals, excuse me. And then maybe, and I put that in red because the first three I borrow from the publication below, but this last one I add myself, the WIOA outcome measure. All this fits into attainment of a degree or certificate. And figuring out how that's the case, and that's a challenge certainly, but that is one of the things that might be impacted by this. And folks that are doing this work would have to think about that hard and figure out if that's true. So with that said, make sure I got everything there. You've got a lot of things going on with career pathways. You've got a lot of definitional work. You've got conversations around what's important elements and guiding principles around it. You have to think about how to build a career pathway system, and you got to go beyond what we're doing now. We're all doing this work already, but we've got to organize this work better. We've got to be systematic about this work. We've got to think about who's going to pull us together, whether it's a backbone organization or some other organization. We've got to think regionally, and we have to think about the data. And so I leave you with that. We have about 5 or 6 minutes that I could open it up for some questions if anybody has any, or any comments or anything that folks would like to talk about.
I don't see anybody typing yet, but feel free to type any questions that you have for Dr. Brian in the chat pod, and we can move on from there. Is there, I'll ask a question to get everything started. Is there a way for some of our CBOs to create a pathway of their own, or is this something that you really need to collaborate through, like a community college and like a number of partners all at one time?
Well, I think you hit on an important piece, because I don't think community colleges and the workforce system can build a good career pathway system without collaborating with CBOs. And I don't think CBOs can do it really without collaborating with colleges and the workforce system. And I say that because remember that if we had to boil it all down, we want to make sure students have an opportunity, or clients or participants have an opportunity, one, to get what they need to get a job. Secondly, to be able to stop out and go to work if they need to. Third, to be able to continue on a career path, all with supports. And everybody, everyone in the system, CBOs, community colleges, universities for that matter, the workforce system, and I mean WIOA Title I, Adult Ed, Folk Rehab, DHS, TANF, what have you, all have a role in that. So I think you have to do it with a lot of partners. And it's ultimately about continuous conversation. And that's really where figuring out how you're going to organize it becomes really important, right? Because that's a lot of work, a lot of extra work. And
right.
Everybody has a day job already. So it can be a challenge, but absolutely, I think it requires lots of partners on both sides.
Mike Williams from Rock River Training up in Rockford made a comment in the chat pod that says different employers in the same business sector have different employment criteria for the same job title. And one of the things that we tried to do in Illinois with the ADAM program, I'm not sure if you are familiar with that one, but it was Accelerated Training in Illinois Manufacturing. We tried to come up with some of the basics that most employers would need, and then if there was a particular employer in a region, we would come up with those particular items to become part of their training program. So is there a way with what you're talking about, the ability for someone to create a generic, for lack of a better word, pathway, and then have like all of the a la carte items that you could add to it? So you might have a main course entree, but then everything that you pull in would be that a la carte thing. And you're looking for a particular slide.
Yeah, that one right there.
Okay.
Well, I mean, number one, I think I realize that it's often not possible to have every employer around the table. But what you can do is have the different components of an industry around the table. And so here in Harper's example, they built this basic manufacturing certificate, but it does require students to make a choice and figure out which direction they're going to head into. Now that doesn't mean that there can't be some common courses, and I'm looking here across these. I don't see a lot of commonality, but a college and employers could work together and build maybe an introduction to manufacturing course. Oh, that's in the top. So you've got Introduction to Manufacturing and Safety, MFT 102. You know, if folks agree that that certificate, that sort of entry-level, first-level certificate is what's going to get everybody in the door, and you get employers around the table to agree to that, you know, then the ask is, will you hire people who have this at that entry level, understanding that there are different pathways based upon your different industries? And I'm pretty sure that if I don't know if anybody from Harper's on the line that can speak to this, but you know, that seems to be reflected somewhat in what they have here. But again, it all comes down to having folks at the table early, defining those roles, making sure they understand what you need them for, and that helps build the buy-in. No systems are perfect, but you know, you get them to buy into and accept that, you know, everybody needs tech math, and if you get all your students with tech math and they finish the certificate, they would be able to go into our work area, or maybe it's we want everybody to have specific work-based learning experiences, and here's kind of a generic work-based learning experience that could be across any of those places. And if you're going to go into mechatronics, you know, you may have a later experience that looks more specific to that. But it's hard work. I mean, that's the truth. It takes a lot of conversation and a lot of folks around the table.
Right.
Brian, this is Tammy. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
And one of the things I think that's a challenge with the EPIC program, too, is that, you know, we are serving SNAP recipients, and they are being referred like on a daily basis. So that whole open entry, open exit concept, when you're dealing with career pathways also. And, you know, is there any guidance or information, you know, as far as, you know, using, you know, doing the open entry concept?
Well, I mean, I think that's a local conversation. I mean, there are a lot of barriers to that working on a college campus. But you do have shorter formats. I mean, it's not out of the question that a college can offer a course for a 4-week or 6-week or 8-week format and have specific enrollment dates, have instead of open entry, open exit, more of a managed entry. And I know in adult education they did open entry, open exit for many, many years. And some places may still do it. But it's challenging. And I think it's really about connecting folks and working on how to solve some of those problems and figuring out when those entry points are. It's going to be probably pretty hard to find a system where it's 100% open entry, open exit.
And some of the things we've discussed with our providers too is the other tools that they can use, which is, the remediation, obviously, if they need that, but then also work readiness skills, work experience, and other modules that they can use to work with these individuals until maybe that class is available or open.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because you have for one, nobody is required to offer remedial in a course format. I mean, you can do short computer-based, preparation, and sometimes you have those kind of boot camp type arrangements. There's certainly the non-credit side of the house, and while I'm the deputy for academic affairs, so obviously I have a bias for credit. That doesn't mean that everybody has to have credit, and there are ways to articulate non-credit into credit. So somebody might go in and start a non-credit program in, I don't know, I'll pick on Harper again, inventory control. And that program may start at different times and have different requirements. But after a student does that for a little while and they get a certificate out of there, that may be able to be articulated into a credit program when one of those starts. Some of this is about federal credit hour definitions, and the ability to provide financial aid is related to when some of these programs start and how many contact hours they have to have. And on the non-credit side, they're not bound by that in the same way. But then, the other piece is your WIOA providers are far out, they're not just community college. And so if you can't do open entry, open exit, what you can do is have a system that has multiple training providers and work together to stagger some of that a little bit. I fully recognize that it's easy for me to say that, but that's part of why you have to have these conversations to figure some of that stuff out. If you have a lot of students around late October, for example, when it's right in the middle of a semester that are being referred, is there an alternative training provider that can build some kind of articulation or prior learning agreement with a college if your ultimate goal is to get them into college? Or do you have an employer that's connected to them where they can do a short-term training program and go into work, and then some of these other opportunities can come up later? It's all about multiple options.
Mike Williams also wrote here, local workforce boards are working with local community colleges to develop career path documentation. Wouldn't CBOs be duplicating this effort? Perhaps the CBOs should be encouraged to work with local workforce investment boards in this endeavor.
I agree 100%. I think that they all should be working together. But I think that for workforce boards and for colleges working with CBOs, we have to be careful. You want to invite them to the table as an equal partner. You don't want to invite them to the table and conversation be, hey, we're working on this, just use this. There is a way to work together to capture all the information that's needed and to build a documentation system that helps everybody, that can help move the system along, and that's what collaboration is all about. I would, if I were a CBO director and somebody called me and said, we really want you to be a part of this, I got this form I want you to use, and you can't play unless you use this, I would have problems with that. But working together to develop tools together, I think, is the way to go about it.
So the benefit is sharing the information, which we can definitely do with our providers in EPIC and what's going on on the WIOA side of the table.
Yeah, you share information, and you share resources, and you share in some of the decision making, and that's a tough shift, I think, from WIA, and it's hard for colleges to do, but I think it's an important shift. You got to think about how you can be a collaborative body and not just a referral body.
Kelsey is typing right now. Let's see if she has something for Brian before we...
Brian, we appreciate your time, to present this with us. I know that you presented this information to the WIOA system just not too long ago, and I think it's some really, really good information.
Well, I'm happy to help anytime. Just let me know.
The question, we can answer the question without Brian. So, again, to reiterate what Tammy just said, thank you for joining us today.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Take care,
Have
Brian.
a good day. Thanks, folks.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, so we're going to minimize the webinar screen for him. And let's answer Kelsey's question. If a customer is co-enrolled in WIOA and EPIC, but then decides to drop out of the EPIC training program and do job training through WIOA instead, what would that mean for their EPIC case? So, and then to finish that question, same goes if they were to decide to do training towards an AAS instead of EPIC. Tammy, do you want to field that one?
Yeah, well, once they are in EPIC, they are in the treatment group, and they will always remain in the treatment group. So whatever happens with them will be studied. My recommendation is, that if you're co-enrolling, EPIC could still be utilized for maybe supportive services or for to pay for work experience. So there's still, if you're using WIOA for the training part of it, and you can still utilize EPIC services for maybe some gaps that WIOA is not doing. So just keep in mind, once they're your clients and once they're enrolled in the EPIC program, they stay there for the study purposes. And the only way that they would leave the study is if the client themselves chose to not be in the study, and they would have to actually call the evaluation team and indicate. And, that's something that we don't want them to do. That should be very minimal people, and the only reason they would do that is if for some reason they don't want somebody to follow and collect data on them down the road. But once in the study, always in the study, so there's really no dropping out of EPIC, if that makes sense.
And would that be a negative or a positive exit?
We're going to have to talk about this offline because, they should still be receiving EPIC services of some kind. Like I said, once again, maybe WIOA is doing the training part of it. I'm not sure, we'd have to look at your design and see, how it's being offered to the clients offline. But, once they're in there, they should still be utilizing EPIC, all along with the WIOA services.
All right, Nellie asks, I have a participant that has just decided not to attend our manufacturing training. He is interested in attending college classes. He's trying to register at Harold Washington. What do I do? Please help. Kind of the same situation that we were just talking about. I will have to take that one offline too, Nellie. Tammy and I can have a discussion with you about that. Olivia, do you want to share your screen?
Yeah.
And if you did not already have a chance to check in, please do so now so that we can know that you were here. All right. We've got your screen big now.
All righty. So
Can you magnify it a little bit, though, from
Yeah.
your end?
I'm going to run through the enrolled dashboard and just touch on a couple of the areas where we have customers getting stuck and they're not necessarily moving or flowing through to green and red sections. So the next couple sections that we're going to go over, I would like all of you guys to take a look at your enrolled dashboard, and if you have any customers in these sections, go in and move out as many as you can. Some of them may need to be in there until you follow up with them, but I know for sure that not all of them need to be in there. So when you have a little bit of time, just try to go through your enrolled dashboard and clean it up as best as you can. So the first section we have some customers in is the referral pending needs 2151. So we have 8 customers whose appointment dates have passed, and a 2151 has not been uploaded to reflect if they showed up or if they didn't show up. The second section is the referral pending 2151 past due. We have 36 customers whose appointment dates have went past, plus the additional 48 hours that you're required to upload that 2151. So we really need to be going in and uploading these 2151s for these customers. There should be no customers in the past due section. The day your customer is supposed to come in for their appointment, you need to either upload a 2151 marking the assessment box showing that they have some assessments they still need completed, or the client services initiated box, meaning you have decided to accept them into your training program, or the no contact from customer, meaning the customer never showed up for their appointment. So we need to be making sure that we're uploading that 2151 and showing what's going on with these customers. The next section is referral accepted and enrollment started, enrollment required. We have 16 customers who have their 2151 uploaded with client services initiated, but they have yet to be enrolled into a training program. Once services are initiated, we need to make sure we're enrolling them into that training program so that we're able to save them a spot and it doesn't fill up before they get enrolled into that. The next section is CBO needs to upload past due. This is referring to the 2151A form. It needs to be uploaded between the 1st and the 5th of each month to reflect the previous month's progress. We currently have 40 customers who do not have a 2151A uploaded for the month of October. So we need to get that uploaded. And then the second section is no progress. So there might be a lot of customers that need to be in this area that don't need moved out. But I did want to bring up the point that if your customer is making no progress repetitively, they probably need to be put through conciliation. So just make sure that we're not letting our customers get by with making no progress or putting in no hours a week. They really need to be doing that, and if they're not, they need to go through conciliation and agree to the terms that they're going to meet the minimum requirements DHS has for them. And then the next section is exited status. Completed documentation needs uploaded. We have 2 customers who've been in here for quite a while that have exited and went through the 90-day follow-up period but don't have the required documentation needed for their exit to be complete. So if you have one of those customers in there, go ahead and upload what they need uploaded. And if you guys are going through this enrolled dashboard and are unsure how to get your customer to move or if they should be moved quite yet, feel free to give me a call, send me an email, and I can definitely walk through that with you guys. Do you guys have any questions on any of the areas we went over? I don't see anybody typing, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to the CBO benchmark report.
Just so that you know, with Olivia doing desk reviews, and I'm going to start going out to some of the CBOs along with Bernita Bohannon, and we're going to start looking at things and helping you guys in the field make sure that some of these areas are cleared up. So you're not alone in this effort. We're here to help you.
Alrighty, yes, and I have talked to quite a few of you. I've been going through, I'm starting with Region 1, so I'll get to the southern regions a little bit later. But I have already talked to quite a few people from Region 1, and I'm seeing a lot of good things. Central State Fear, you're the one that I'm doing next, so I will be calling you sometime this week or next. But the next thing I want to go over is the report. So we have the CBO benchmark report available. If you click up in your on the top tabs, you'll just click reports, and it'll bring you to the reports page. I have a lot more reports than you guys are going to see. The new one that we're going to go over is this CBO benchmark report. This is just kind of showing like a breakdown of where your customers are. There's enrolled in training, And this is the total count of the customers you have enrolled in training. And then the second one is enrolled in employment-only services. So it's the total number of customers who are enrolled only in employment-only services. And then we have employed unsubsidized employment for 30 weeks or more. So these are all the customers who have exited because they were hired by an employer. They will be the ones that are in follow-up, missing documentation, and completely exited. And then the employee retention are the customers who have completed their 90-day follow-up and have all their documentation needed. Do you guys have any question on how those reports are broken out? Okay. And if you click on these numbers, it will bring you up a customer list that will show you all the customers that you have in that section. And that is all I have for today, for right now at least. Dee, are you going over the EPIC partner resources?
I was talking and I was on mute. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to make my screen bigger. And right now, I want to refresh everybody's memory about the EPIC pilot program resources. We have, I'm going to go back to the overall partner guide. Some of you are using this, some of you may not be using this, but we try to keep everything up to date here so that we've got it available for everybody. So we've got tutorials that we've done, we have archived webinars. We try to get those up as soon as possible. Last week we did not have a webinar at all because the CBO was on an off week and DHS was closed on Friday. So our last webinar was November 4th, and we've got that there for you to watch it. We've got our full list of resources that are available, and it's broken down by CBO and DHS. And if you look over here, we have topics. So if you're looking for the fiscal documents, they're all in here. So take a look in here. The other thing that we do is as updates are coming out, we list them in the updates. And every time that we have a webinar, Olivia sends out the little notice with the points that we covered and then has the agenda in here so that you don't have to watch the entire webinar if there's nothing in here that you need to know. But if you do need to refresh your memory on something that we did talk about, you can go into the webinar and watch that. The other thing that we have available is the location for you to add success stories. And all you have to do is click here, and it will take you to the main Illinois WorkNet page so that you can submit a success story. Now, we are working on making sure that we have an EPIC program category for you to submit your success story to. And we will, if it's not there right now, look, there's an EPIC motivation and an EPIC opportunity. Holy cow, we got both of them up there, success through EPIC, so we've got the EPIC category in there. And Tammy's saying, please, 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 pretty please with sugar on top, add your success stories from people. It's great if you can get a picture, but make sure that you're using the photo release. Then the other thing that we need to do is any of the updates that come out, we have what has just been updated. So if you need to find out something new, then we have all of that information there as well. So if you're ever looking for something, check here first. If you can't find it, then we will be happy to send it to you, but please check here first. Okay, and next on our list is the reverse referral process. we do need to update this. We had a discussion with the DHS leadership, and what we would like to have happen is to have you, if you're going to be doing a reverse referral for one of your customers, we would like for you to send an email to the primary contact, the backup contact, and the statewide contact that is on the list that is in the file pod that says DHS primary contacts. We want to be able to track the referrals when they're coming into DHS if we can, and by doing the email to those contacts, they can check to see in advance if the customer is on TANF or not and be alerted to the fact that they are going to be coming into the office. Now, we can't do much about people that hear about it from a friend or that maybe hear our press release when it comes out or listen to a PSA, but if we can control the reverse referrals by sending an email with the 2151 referral form back to the CBO, to the DHS contacts from the CBO, it will help with getting those people tracked into the system a little bit better. All right, so that's it for my screen share. Tammy, what about the update on collaborative training?
Yeah, we got some exciting news with that. We've identified a vendor that we're looking at using for our collaborative training effort. It's been approved through Commerce and also through DHS. So we're working internally to come up with a program training design. This is going to be, it's not going to be just training for the sake of training. This is probably could be as much as, like I said, a 6-month training opportunity for both DHS and the CBOs. And what we want to do is we want to have them come in and do an assessment of where we're at and exactly what our training needs are, and then we'll have, a variety of different ways that we'll be offering the training. But what I would like to ask is, and we're designing this contract that we're doing with our providers, I would like to have maybe 2 CBOs that would like to volunteer to work with us on this, because we want to make sure that we're addressing ground level training needs. So if somebody from, if I could have, some people volunteer to help us with this, that would be great. You can send me an email and let me know if you're interested. And then we are having our first meeting actually to work on the contract language tomorrow. And then we'll follow that up, and then we'll invite, the people that we've identified to help us with, developing this training strategy. And I anticipate it'll be kicked off, I'm hoping, starting in January. The first thing we really want them to focus on is the intake assessment, like a triage methodology on identifying clients and the referral process, because we will still be doing referrals probably through, I'm guessing, May with DHS to meet our numbers. So that's going to be one of our first priorities, is that. And then we also want to look at, the CBO side as far as program services, working with employers, and retention efforts, if somebody, quits their job, how to re-engage them. So those types of activities on the CBO side. And we also want to have collaborative training so that we can kind of co-manage, or like I say, co-parent clients. So DHS and CBO career navigators are kind of talking the same language and everything too. So that's kind of where we're at with that. We are moving it forward, and like I said, I'm really hoping that January we'll be kicking this off. So does anybody have questions on that? You can definitely ask me. Otherwise, you'll be hearing more about this down the road. And if you have any suggestions, also please let us know if there's specific training that you're interested in. Send me an email on that too. Let me know, what you think would be beneficial for the EPIC program and for your, for your caseworkers and your organization when it comes to specific training needs. And that's all I got on that one. Dee, do you have anything else?
I don't. I'm going to see 2 CBOs tomorrow. Are you guys excited?
Hopefully the weather will be great for you.
Yeah, it's not supposed to get flurries until Saturday, so
yeah.
I'm going to be out of the city by then.
The only thing else I got to say is no webinar next Wednesday, and everybody have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds good, Alan. All right. We'll talk to everybody in 2 weeks, if not before.
Have a great day. See ya.